Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. A publisher, columnist, and blogger, Andrew Breitbart is the founder of the Breitbart network of investigative news websites, including Breitbart.com, Breitbart.tv, Big Government, Big Hollywood, Big Journalism, and Big Peace. Big Cosmos is surely on the boards.
I need to have a big synthesis and get it down to one portal.
Andrew's new book, Andrew Breitbart's new book, Righteous Indignation, Excuse Me While I Save the World. Andrew Breitbart, welcome.
Thank you.
The Liberal Grows Up, Segment 1. You describe in Righteous Indignation a privileged upbringing in Southern California. Exclusive schools, very comfortable circumstances. Your parents weren't particularly political, but they were more or less conservative. And then this, I'm quoting from the book. Through some form of osmosis, I considered myself a liberal. How come?
My parents didn't fight for to maintain what it was they were teaching me through their deeds and their acts. They are a very silent generation. I grew up around with friends who had younger baby boomer parents, and they were very forthright in their politics. They would go to their rock concerts. They'd go to their Rock for Kampuchea. They'd fly to Philadelphia for Live Aid. And I remember my mother would watch Lawrence Welk on Saturday nights. The juxtaposition of...
That's not a hard choice. You want where the action was.
It was, and so as much as I loved my parents, the flow towards my friends and their parents' way of life and way of thinking was the most natural thing in the world.
Okay.
I loved my parents, but rejecting their orthodoxy was simple.
Once again, from Righteous Indignation, a turning point. You're in New Orleans, you're studying at Tulane, you're sitting down for a math exam, quote, and you're not doing well. I started to consider that maybe years of skating by, recklessly expecting everything to work out, had been exactly the wrong approach to derivatives. Nice sentence, by the way. Apparently, I realized sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes you do have to make it work out, which means that values do matter, close quote. Andrew, you're raised in a conservative family and come out a liberal. You go to what you called, I don't have experience of Tulane, but I have no reason to doubt you.
It's any humanities department USA, and I hate to do this to Tulane because I'd love to be invited back there to speak to the students, to tell them about an alternative approach.
I guarantee it lies in your future at some point. Somebody will fund a trip to Tulane. But it's a liberal, it's an American university of its time, and you come out of that a conservative. How did this happen?
Well,
you are swimming against
I
was
an American Studies major, and I really did think that when I chose that, that it would be reading about the Constitution, the founding fathers, Mark Twain, and sort of a benign approach towards the American experience. And I didn't realize this until afterwards, because I can say this with absolute authority. Had I not graduated, had I not been given my diploma, it would have only been me to blame. When in New Orleans, do as the New Orleanians, I really did partake in the culture down there, and I can't believe I did graduate. But there was a point where...
Mardi Gras every night for Andrew Breitbart.
It was, and it was as depressing as it was ecstatic and fun. It was a prison of decadence, and it was 4 years of nonstop where people would come and visit me from my former life in Los Angeles, and they'd leave saying it was the best time of their lives. And as they'd get on the plane to depart the Bacchanalia, I would whisper under my breath, "Please take me with you." Because it was Groundhog Day. It was every single. It was the It was the Monday nights. It was the Monday nights when people would say, "Do you want to go out?" And I said, "Nah, I think I'm going to stay in and study." And then 15 minutes later, I'd go out and I'd meet them. So I really didn't. I didn't dedicate myself to academia, and it was only after I graduated when I got a letter or an email, I don't remember the exact year, I think it was around 1994, asking me to assess my degree. You know, it was
self-assessment or
an assessment of it. And I started to look through the books, wondering, what was that? What was that education? And what I remember was, to synthesize it, I've watched C-SPAN my entire life. And I remember I've watched Noam Chomsky talk in this strange
Linguist.
this jargon that is not accessible to the average person. And I remember thinking to myself, there was a period there in my American Studies class where I was hearing the word deconstruction and semiotics a bit too many times. And I'm like, what's going on here? What is this language? What are they trying to do? And I started to analyze the courses that I took, and I realized that it was cultural Marxist theory. I'm like, this is kind of strange. I thought that this was supposed to be American studies, not German, Italian, nihilistic theory.
So in a way, it's just as well that you were debauched all 4 years.
That's the whole point of that chapter, is that I think alcohol saved me.
I don't want my own college-age children to hear that line. I'll edit that line out from the version they see. After Tulane, you go back to Los Angeles and scrape around. You end up waiting table. You get a job as a courier at a production company, and an important moment comes when you know the man who will become your father-in-law, the comedian and actor Orson Bean, known to people of a certain generation from To Tell the Truth, known to people of another generation from Desperate Housewives. And here, I'll just quote to you from Righteous Indignation. One day I asked Orson why he had Rush Limbaugh's book, The Way Things Ought to Be, on his shelf. I was convinced to the core of my being that Rush Limbaugh was a Nazi, anti-black, anti-Jewish, and anti-all things decent. Orson simply suggested that I listen to him again. And what happened when you did?
Well, it was the 1992 election cycle, and at that point I thought I was a liberal, and I started listening to Rush simply because my alternative radio station had turned into a grunge rock festival. I loathed Kurt Cobain and Eddie Vedder so much that I switched to the AM dial out of desperation. And so that's really, I have to thank grunge music for turning me into a conservative. And I remember the first month or two thinking, well, I may not agree with his politics, but at no point have I heard him intimate anything that appears to be racist, sexist, or homophobic. And I started to ask people around me, have you ever listened to this Rush Limbaugh creature? And they said, yes, he's a racist, sexist, and a homophobe. I said, okay, I need some help here, because I've been listening now for months as I'm driving on LA freeways delivering scripts. He's not. He's not. And what I realized is I believed to the core of my being that I had listened to him. If you had given me a lie detector test, I promise you I would have passed, because with conviction, the culture, the 60 Minutes report on him, all of the things that I had been told reflected that negative stereotype. But I, in fact, had never assessed him myself, and recognizing that the mainstream media doesn't necessarily tell you the truth, or tells you the truth from its ideological standpoint, became this panacea for me, where I started to challenge the mainstream media.
Segment 2, the Democrat media complex, again from Righteous Indignation. Limbaugh, like the professor I always wanted but never had, created a vivid mental picture of the architecture of a world that I resided in but couldn't see completely, the Democrat media complex. Describe the architecture.
Well, it's the Matrix. I mean, it really, for me, it was, if you've ever been to Coney Island and you see those holograms where there's a picture of the Empire State Building and you're supposed to squint, and you squint and you squint and you can't see it, but eventually you see the Eiffel Tower. And you're like, and then once you see the Eiffel Tower, you can't not see the Eiffel Tower. And through every day, Rush Limbaugh analyzing the source material of the world, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, ABC, CBS, and NBC, he was able to create for me a very vivid picture that the people who were allegedly objective and neutral reporters and journalists were the front line of the political battle. And they used their objectivity as their greatest weapon, because they were telling young, impressionable people like me who believed in Woodward and Bernstein and who believed in Walter Cronkite, wait a second, you're telling me that perhaps ideology played a role in how they interpreted stories or how they chose one story over the other. And so then the Matrix or the Democrat media complex became everything to me. In fact, when discussing politics, I always turn it back to the complex. It's always about seeing the world and hoping that people see the Eiffel Tower.
So this is, you're listening to Limbaugh in '92 during that election cycle, right? Mm-hmm. And you remain. What I'm getting at here is, who is the Democrat media complex then, and who is the Democrat media complex now? What's changed? What's changed?
Other than much has changed, actually, and that's the new media, and that's the whole point of this entire book.
Right.
Is that Rush took the moribund AM dial, and at the end of the day was a media critic, but he was a relentless media critic, and he was exposing to. He wasn't just working with ditto heads. If ditto heads were what Rush Limbaugh were about, they could care less about. Just let him be and talk to the yokels out there in the hinterlands. They're worried about Andrew Breitbarts of the world, people that would actually listen to what he has to say and awaken people so that they can see that these people are using the media as a way to reinforce a herd mentality within the culture. And so what I see now is they used to get away with it. Rush Limbaugh took the moribund AM dial, and now it's a flourishing realm where countless people, from Michael Medved to Dennis Prager to Sean Hannity, are showing people or granting people a perspective or the alternative reality from the mainstream media. And Matt Drudge comes along in 1995, and he tells people, hey, look, you don't need to have an AM radio station, which costs a lot of money, and you have to have a certain skill set. He said, look, if you have a modem and a computer, you can enter this thing. We're now 20 plus years into this new media revolution, and the difference is there is open media warfare now between Katie Couric and the Rush Limbaughs and the Matt Drudges of the world. We are a polarized nation. This is a civil war based upon communication.
Okay, so let me take... Here, again, quoting from Righteous Indignation, I, Andrew Breitbart, I'm at war with the mainstream media. I'm at war with the mainstream media because they portray themselves as objective observers of reality when they're hacks who think they can destroy everything America stands for. But shouldn't you relax? Things are working out. Things are working out. There's Fox News, there's Rush Limbaugh, there are all kinds of alternatives.
That's not enough. That's not enough. That's not enough. This is what angers me so about the...
That's what I want to know. Why aren't you more relaxed? We're 20 years into it, just as you said. Why don't you say, oh, okay, I'll take a... I'm going to spend half my time on the beach in Santa Monica.
Because AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. The big...
What do you want? What do you want?
I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny. It's not robust. It's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does. George Soros is throwing money like crazy.
You want an NPR?
I want everything. I want us. Right. They have an NPR. They're so slick in understanding how important media is. They've convinced the government to pay them to propagate their worldview. How come we're not fighting for money to propagate our worldview? Because we don't believe in it. Okay, then use the free market to convey the same ideas with the same level of sophistication and excellence that NPR does, because they are superior at what they do, just as Jon Stewart is superior at what he does. I grant Hollywood and the experts in propaganda for what they do.
You admit that they're good. In fact, that's what annoys you.
That it annoys me, and it annoys that our side does not commit to this battle.
All right.